Hello and welcome back to my channel, Wyvern Hearted Ink and Friends. Today I am trying something a little different. I am mainly an illustrator, so I work mainly in watercolor and gouache and paper pencil. I don't really do a lot of 3D work, and I've been very afraid and intimidated by clay and using 3D stuff. I just really every time I've ever tried to do anything with clay, I've always made it so ill-proportioned and awkward, and it always comes out wobbly and weird. And I think it's just because it's a totally different way of thinking from illustrating. Sculpting is more of a building and taking away, whereas drawing is just putting stuff down and smattering layer upon layer upon layer until you like it. And so it's a slightly different way of thinking. But I bought this air dry clay in terracotta, and I was not a I bought it in terracotta because I couldn't find any that was just not colored at all. At my local Michael's, especially not for like this much for this good of a price. The 5 pounds was only like 20 bucks, I think. So it was super cheap. And because I've never really done this sort of stuff, at least on a legitimate basis, you know, I have not gone for getting something like this. And I didn't want to invest like a ton of money on some really nice clay if I wasn't gonna be pursuing it further. So I bought this 5 pounds just to mess around, play with it. And my original idea was that I wanted to make a character model. I've seen other comic artists do this so that they have a 3D character model so they can see their character at any angle and have a good idea for what they're going to use in each scene, right? Thing is, I haven't made a character model since I was in art school, and I do not have all the proper supplies. I tried my best with making this, but I think the wires that were covered in like a sort of plasticky rubber, the green ones, I think they were too soft, and so when the clay dried, it cracked all around all the jointed spaces and kind of fell apart a little bit. It's still somewhat together. I used it as a plant decoration in one of my pots, but it just didn't come out how I was expecting or how I was hoping, and I really didn't feel like I'd be able to make a very detailed character model out of this sort of stuff, because I did not realize that air dry clay does not work like normal clay that you have to put in a kiln. I thought that air dry clay meant that it just dried and was hard enough that you didn't have to worry about it anymore, right? It does harden, and it does harden enough that like as long as it doesn't get wet again, it's fine. But the issue with air dry clay is that the reason it spreads so nicely is because of how wet it is. And when it dries, it shrinks, and that causes it to crack. So it's not a very good medium for anything that you want really exact. It's more of a playful, sort of abstract way to use clay, I guess. And I have heard that you can get it to work without cracking if you bake it, but that kind of defeats the purpose of it being air dry clay. So anyways, I decided that I would do something a little simpler than a character model after this little project failed. And so I decided to use it on one of my canvases. I have really enjoyed making 3D art on canvases. I've had a lot of fun with adding fake florals or real dried florals and hot glue and making sort of a physical formation outside of the canvas. It's kind of been an experiment for me because, like I said, I'm more of an illustrator, and my canvas work tends to be more of my fun, thinking outside of the box sort of artwork that I do. And I really enjoy it. It's really a lot more stress relieving than doing illustrative work because it's a lot more abstract. So I decided that I was going to experiment with the clay and I was going to put it on canvas, right? I wasn't sure what to expect because of how the character model had turned out. So when I went ahead and did this, I didn't record me initially marking out everything, but I drew on my canvas what I wanted to create, and then I modeled in clay the things that I wanted to add to pop out, and I let them dry over a couple nights. And supposedly, as long as you paint over your air dry clay, it should no longer get wet and like fall apart on you. So I waited a couple days and then I decided, okay, now I need to seal this to my canvas because it all fell off in the drying process because it shrunk, right? And some of the pieces, because they shrunk, they didn't quite fit in their spots anymore. So some of them shrunk upward off of the canvas. So I did a little bit of work to crack the clay in specific spots and break it apart into pieces so that it fit better on the canvas and so it sat more flat. And then I used Mod Podge to do an initial base to seal it to the canvas. After sealing it to the canvas, I waited another couple days, let it fully dry, but I still wasn't wholly convinced that it would stay on the canvas, so I decided I was going to add hot glue as well as paint it and get everything painted down in such a way that it would stay together. So my first step was to paint it, and I really struggled with deciding what I wanted my colors to be in this. Originally, I wanted to go with a really warm palette. I was doing oranges and reds, and I liked the idea in my head, but then when I put it on the canvas, I hated it. It was just too much brightness for my artwork personally. I tend to stick to very cool tones, very cold colors. I tend to not like warm tones, but I try to branch out when I can. So went with the warm tones, hated how they looked, decided to paint over the top of them, and I went with a much cooler tone palette, mainly blues, purples, and some green, and I think it turned out really nice together. It became much more cohesive, it felt much more together in some aspect or another, that with these cool tones and then this yellow-based skin tone. I think it turned out really nice. And I really wanted to make the eye not only the focus as the focal point of the canvas, but also this really heavily detailed, interesting point within the painting. So originally I did a lot of designs around it, inside of it. I tried to paint it multiple colors, and then eventually I went over it with hot glue because I kind of liked the aspect of filling in the iris, or filling in the pupil, I mean. And when I filled in the pupil, the hot glue dripped down over the iris, and when it did that, it kind of had this melted, gooey effect, and maybe I'm just morbid and morose, but I think it turned out really interesting. So I went even further in that direction. I made the tears gooier. I added an extra layer of sparkly tears. I just tried to put hot glue everywhere. I made it very drippy, and it was very fun. I am definitely going to be investing in some hot glue sticks that are sparkle or that are different colors. I think I am gonna have way too much fun experimenting with all the different kinds of hot glue that I can get. This experiment was all done to try and help me move forward with my larger painting that I'm working on creating a custom frame for. If you haven't seen that, that'll be up in the cards. That piece is really important to me and I really want to do it justice, so I decided to experiment on this piece and come up with something that I felt like would work for that one. My only concern currently with this piece is that because of the clay and because of everything that I'm adding to it, it is quite heavy for a smaller canvas. And I do worry about how heavy it would make the other canvas because it's already very heavy because it is such a large piece. So I may not go in this direction with that piece. I may just stick to fake florals and making that somehow work. But it was a really nice experiment and I adore how it came out. I added the little fake eyelashes with pieces of mixed media paper that I painted and then curled and then I hot glued them in. They're actually super stiff now, they're not soft at all, and they add so much. I'm so proud, I'm so excited. This piece, along with many others that I've created in this kind of genre of canvas work, is available on my Ko-Fi shop. You can find that in my links below, in my socials. And if you're interested in any of these pieces or anything similar, come check me out. You can also check out any of my merch for my comic, and it will all be there. So, anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This was a fun but very long process that I was not expecting to take this long. So I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. But I will see you all later, and yeah, be safe.